So while everyone online is talking about Dune 2 and Madame Web, okay, so because it takes me so long to edit my YouTube videos, this is probably dead discourse at this point. So replace this reference with anything else more topical, like The Fall Guy, Furiosa, Ozempic, or some YouTuber that's making everyone mad right now. I don't know, just anything. I'm going to talk about Don't Worry Darling because I'm not interested in being too successful. I find Don't Worry Darling fascinating, even though it's been like 2 years since that movie came out, because it proves that all the Hollywood money in the world can't fix bad writing. Don't Worry Darling has incredible locations, beautiful production design, the best actors working today, and it still falls apart because the story is weak, messy, unsatisfying. I like to call it first draft energy, which is a very common problem. It was my main critique of Sam Levinson's work in my last video. Go check that out, trying to get more views. I think a lot of people don't have the patience or don't want to put in the time to get the script where it needs to be, and then we end up with something like Madame Web, which is like a meme fire of AI dialogue.
He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
But here's the interesting thing with Don't Worry Darling. The movie script is actually the second draft, not the first. So the first script of Don't Worry Darling was written by the Dyke Brothers, and it was on the 2019 blacklist, which is this one right here. And then the second script was revised by Silberman, who helped Olivia Wilde produce Booksmart and also revised the Booksmart script as well. So she's obviously like experienced in story editing, but that's this one right here. I really wish I had two hands and I could hold them both up for a thumbnail.
Is this a good thumbnail?
Yeah, those are great thumbnails.
So all joking aside, we have two scripts. One was written by the Dyke Brothers, made it on the blacklist, which is actually a really high achievement. And then it was bought by New Line Cinema, and Olivia Wilde and Silberman got their hands on it and changed a bunch of stuff about it. What I found really interesting is that with each iteration of this story, it actually got worse, with the Dyke script being the strongest version of the story and the movie being the weakest. And I wanted to analyze how that happened, because honestly, I don't know how you could rewrite something and make it worse, but they managed to do it. So initially, I thought the issue was that the Dyke script was more of a science fiction horror movie, and Olivia Wilde and Silberman changed their script to be more of a psychological thriller. And I thought maybe there was just some like decisions that didn't translate between genres. But then I noticed that the Silberman script was a lot more vast in scope, a lot more characters, more locations, more things happening. And while I think those two things contributed to a weaker story, I think the real culprit is that with every story change made by Silberman and Wilde, they made their main character Alice a less compelling, engaging, and active protagonist. Let's get into it. Blah, I'm a YouTuber. Okay. The story is about a modern day woman trapped in a simulated version of 1950s American suburbia. That premise stays constant throughout all the versions, but how each version executes the story is handled very differently. So one thing to remember is in the Dyke script, our protagonist is Evelyn, and then in the Silberman script and the movie, our protagonist is Alice. Let's start off with the Dyke script. Evelyn starts off in an unhappy marriage with Clifford, the Dyke's version of Jack. After sex, she rubs Lysol on her nether regions to avoid getting pregnant, even though Clifford really wants to have kids. She makes him breakfast in the morning, and on this particular morning, she makes his eggs too runny, and he gets weirdly pouty about it. He's kind of a prick. On page 15, Clifford finds the Lysol, puts two and two together, and is violent toward Evelyn, grabbing her and then breaking a mirror. When Clifford's not home, being mean to Evelyn, she's isolated in her house cooking and cleaning. So in the first 20 pages, we establish that Evelyn is in a pretty miserable situation. She has a very compelling reason to want to leave even before we know it's a simulation. And then we get to the movie where Wilde and Silberman made the baffling choice to make this simulation the most awesome place on Earth. The movie literally starts with Alice getting drunk with her cool, trendy neighbors. Her husband goes down on her all the time. She spends her days hanging out in her beautiful home, lounging by the pool, and getting lots of sunshine in beautiful Palm Springs. When I first watched this, I was like, are they accepting applications? I want to get drunk with Nick Kroll. In contrast with Evelyn, we have a real reason to root and empathize with her. Whereas Alice, I mean, she's a likable character, but I don't know, she's got a pretty sweet gig going. It's hard for me to be like, oh God, hope she gets out of this one. Alice does have to cook and clean, which is annoying, but the rest of her time is her own, and she gets to go have fun with Olivia Wilde. One of the key differences between the Van Dyke script and the Silberman script / movie is when Alice / Evelyn finds out about the simulation. Evelyn finds out about the simulation on page 19. It's basically the catalyst for the entire movie. While shopping, Evelyn sees Clifford slip into a motel room, and she thinks that he's cheating on her, so she goes to confront him, but then inadvertently discovers an exit portal into the real world, and she wakes up in a Matrix pod. First off, Evelyn finds out about the simulation through her own decision to confront Clifford. If she wasn't strong enough to challenge her husband, she would have never discovered that she was trapped in a simulation. Secondly, and more importantly, Evelyn has a clear motivation and mystery to solve right at the start of the film. What did she just see? Is she losing her mind, or is something more nefarious going on? Will Lawrence Fishburne appear, offering her 2 pills? Who knows? With this one scene, Evelyn establishes herself as an active protagonist and has the clear goal of escaping the simulation. On the other hand, Alice doesn't even know she's in a simulation until the climax of the movie. After electroshock therapy, Alice goes home all better, and then Jack hums a song that triggers the wildest flashback in cinematic history. Inexplicably, Alice has a flashback of Jack's memories of him taking care of her while she's trapped in the simulation. Wrap your brain around that one. Why Alice is seeing Jack's memories, I have no idea. Maybe the electroshock therapy gave her telepathic powers. Silberman and Wilde changing when Alice figures out it's a simulation has a huge impact on her character. Without that knowledge, she has no motivation to escape because she has no idea that she's trapped. She just feels like something is off the whole time, so she has nothing to do for the entire movie. I have to wonder why Silberman and Wilde made this choice, and I think it's because they changed the genre of the movie. They obviously wanted more of a psychological thriller, and they wanted that big Sixth Sense twist ending. But the information they tried to withhold is that Alice is trapped in a simulation. But if we're comparing this to The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis has a clear motivation in that movie to help this child. The mystery and the motivation aren't the same thing, so that twist ending provides context to his point of view. The twist in Don't Worry Darling is the whole plot, so our main character can't move forward until she knows what's happening. Whereas Evelyn spends the whole movie trying to figure out how to get out of the simulation. Which brings me to my next point. In the Silberman script and the movie, Alice starts to see hallucinations right away. She sees, not in this order, scary dancers, ballet studio nonsense, ominous bathtub stare, spooky pool drowning, and window glass squishing. Oh yeah, the plane. She sees the plane too. Oh yeah, and she sees an empty egg. That's not really a hallucination, but it's just a weird thing that kind of happens. These scenes look really cool in a trailer, but they're borderline tiresome because they're so long and they have no impact on the story. Evelyn only sees 2 hallucinations, and she only sees it after she's exited the simulation the first time. She sees her neighbor Betsy running around with her brain exposed, and she sees Betsy's kids do the same action twice, kind of like that deja vu scene in The Matrix.
Oh, deja vu.
Evelyn knows something is wrong, but doesn't know exactly what. These hallucinations push Evelyn to try to figure out the mystery when she was considering giving up. It's not just spooky things that happen for the sake of a trailer. There's a screenwriting expression, a protagonist is only as good as their antagonist. And oh boy, the changes made by Silberman and Wilde absolutely neuter the villain of their story and then in turn make Alice a less compelling character. In the Van Dyke script, Evelyn has a very strong antagonist in Clifford. His motivation for putting her in the simulation is absolutely unhinged. In the real world, Clifford felt emasculated by her success as a neurosurgeon, so he trapped her in the simulation so she could be his plaything forever. He's also a leader in the simulation, so he gets other husbands to put their wives in this nightmare. So yeah, not a great guy. In the Silberman script and movie, Clifford is split into Jack and Frank. But looking at Jack's actions throughout the movie, he's actually a pretty loving husband. He compliments her, goes down on her regularly, and wants to have kids but doesn't really pressure her. It seems like they were trying to make him a more sympathetic character. He was also played by Harry Styles, who was the great miscast of 2022. What's weird is all of Clifford's bad parts got put into Frank, this cult leader that, for some reason, likes to watch people get it on in his bedroom. Why this scene is in the movie, I have no idea. Here's the problem with making Frank the antagonist. Alice doesn't have a strong relationship with Frank, so there's only one scene where they're actually at odds with each other. He's the cult leader, and she's just one of the wives of his underlings. It's tough to create tension between them because they don't interact with each other. In the movie, they don't even talk to each other until the hour and 10-minute mark.
I learned something very exciting.
Oh, really? What's that?
We went from having one truly evil husband who interacts with our protagonist in every scene to having one misguided husband and then a cult leader who has no real interest in our protagonist. I think they just wanted to hire more name actors, but by doing this, they've destroyed the relationship between Alice and her villain. Side note, in the Silberman script, Alice and Jack aren't even married in the real world, which is maybe the only revision of hers that I like. Jack is just a pharmaceutical rep at the hospital who has a crush on Alice from afar. She never even knows that he's there. In my ultimate version of this story, I would take the Van Dyke script and then add that revision because that would make Clifford actually the most unhinged sociopath to ever grace our screens. But for some reason, in the final movie, they cut this. Again, I guess to make Jack more sympathetic? But he's not really, because he's just a greasy version of Harry Styles who listens to too many incel podcasts and for some reason can't make himself dinner.
I'm starving. I haven't eaten.
Why not?
I wasn't sure what you wanted and you never text me back.
My guy, your wife is a surgeon. Order some Uber Eats. All of these changes to the world, the simulation, the antagonist, the hallucinations, all have the cumulative effect in that the stakes are so much lower in the movie and the Silberman script compared to the Van Dyke script. In the original script, there is so much more for Evelyn to fight against, and therefore the stakes are so much higher. We established that even before she learns about the simulation, things are not going well for her. When she first escapes the simulation, her muscles have atrophied, so she helplessly flails around until Clifford plugs her back into her matrix pod. Back in the simulation, Evelyn tries to drug Clifford's mashed potatoes, and then it turns into this scene from Inglourious Bastards. Does Clifford know? Is he just playing along? Can Evelyn really trick him? The answer is no. Clifford does not eat the potatoes. After the mashed potato incident, Clifford traps Evelyn and makes her get electroshock therapy. We think that all hope is lost, but then Evelyn seduces Clifford, knocks him out, ties him up, and then does an unspeakable thing with a broom and his butthole, and then learns about the next exit portal. Clifford catches up to her, but not before she's made it back into the real world. He tries to lobotomize her with a screwdriver, but then she stabs him with a steak knife. But then she wakes up in the simulation in like a mental institution, and a doctor is telling her that she killed her husband. We almost end the movie thinking that Evelyn lost. She's trapped in this simulation in this mental institution, but then her neighbor Betsy Han Solo's in and lets her out. The Van Dyke brothers put their protagonist in a hellish nightmare world controlled by a man who's holding all the cards. Evelyn wins through her own cunning and determination. In the Silberman script and movie, Alice just sort of notices that weird things are happening. She is just generally feeling uncomfy. It's not until the climax of the movie that Alice really understands the gravity of her situation. And then there's another baffling scene where Jack hugs Alice too hard, so she hits him over the head with a whiskey glass. When I first saw this, I was like, is he trying to hug her to death? Like, what is happening? And then Olivia Wilde stumbles in and explains the stakes to her. Alice goes outside and the community is exploding for some reason. All the wives are giving each other uncomfy looks. And of course, there's a car chase because this is the climax of a movie. And then going back to Frank, we can see how splitting Clifford into two characters was a terrible decision. Frank is the antagonist, so we have to have an ending scene with him, But Alice is busy drag racing in the desert, so Frank's wife Shelley stabs him with a steak knife for literally no reason. Like 30 minutes ago, she was so bought into this whole thing, and now she just decides to kill him. So with all of these changes, Alice spends most of the time wandering around, and then the stakes are crammed into the last 20 minutes of this nearly 2-hour-long movie. On top of that, she doesn't even get a showdown with the antagonist of the film. The movie wants the audience to feel empowered, like, break free from your shackles, ladies, but it feels so empty and unsatisfying. A big theme of this film is fighting against female oppression. A successful modern woman is forced into the outdated role of happy servant to her husband. Once she discovers that her agency and former life have been stolen from her, she must fight against a literal patriarchal system and the men that have trapped her there. However, with all of the changes made to the original script by Silberman and Wilde, Alice is less of a fighter and has less to fight against than Evelyn. It is bananas that these two talented women made decisions that made their film inherently less feminist. So what's the lesson here? Don't do second drafts? I fundamentally don't believe that. Maybe if it ain't broke, don't fix it. While I was crafting this conclusion, my boyfriend and co-writer of this video reminded me of a previous video I did on The Chair. It's a reality TV series about two directors making two movies from the same script. The original screenwriter had been working on that script for like 5 years, had sold it a couple times, but for some reason, both directors felt like they had to completely rewrite it in the 4 weeks they had for development. It was super stressful for the production teams around them, and they both tried to grab writing credits, even though they got pushback from the WGA.
Shane ended up cutting 2 characters. Anna ended up cutting 2 different characters.
And Dan's face.
What? I had to adapt and write in the style of Shane Dawson, which is a challenge.
I'm on page 85. I need like 20 more minutes.
20 more minutes?
He's mentioned that he might want some kind of co-writing credit. I have to tell you, that's absolutely ridiculous.
I feel like something like that happened here. I feel like Silberman and Wilde wanted to put their own creative spin on the story and had like 4 weeks to do it. And why creative people feel the need to do this, I hate to say it, but I think it comes down to ego. They want to be auteurs, the singular creative geniuses. But you know what? A lot of incredibly successful movies have been made with people coming together with separate skills to make something. That's kind of what a movie is. Making good work takes time, and it's impossible to rewrite a feature-length script in a rush. Maybe the better thing to do in this situation would be to work with the Dyke Brothers as writers, put in your notes, and then shoot the script they spent years working on. You don't get all the credit, but you would probably have a critically and financially successful film, so who cares? Hello, Editing Tara here. I felt like I was being a little harsh in this part of the video, so I decided to do a little bit more digging on why Silberman and Wilde made some of these changes. They thought the Van Dyke script wasn't feminist enough.
Take this idea of a woman who believes she's living in the 1950s, realizes she's in a simulation. What if we took that and kind of told the story through a female lens?
But of course it's from a female lens. It's about a woman fighting against a patriarchal system, risking everything for her freedom. That is the very definition of feminism. The only part of the Van Dyke script that felt to me like a straight man wrote it was the broom and butthole scene at the climax of the story. Of course, a straight man thinks the worst thing that can happen to him is putting something up his butt.
Right in the butt.
So apparently Silberman and Wilde had a chat with famous activist Gloria Steinem, and Steinem pointed out,
to really change something, you kind of have to rip up from the studs a life that in a lot of ways you probably like, in the idea of what are you willing to give up to do the right thing?
And that's why they made the simulation such an awesome place. Will Alice even want to leave if her shithead husband is no longer British or good at cunnilingus? It's an interesting idea, but they don't explore it because Alice doesn't know she's in a simulation until the last 20 minutes of this film. And by then it's too late. Alice has to make a break for it before the credits roll. What's weird is Olivia Wilde's character, Bunny, actually does have this conflict.
I chose this. My kids are here. Because here they're alive. And here I didn't lose them. Here I can keep them.
That's interesting. That's a cool conflict. But again, we don't have time to explore it because Olivia Wilde just tells us and then Alice runs away. But why didn't Alice get a similar conflict? Or the same conflict? Why not give Alice kids and then she has to struggle with the choice between living in the simulation with her children and her family or fighting against something that's inherently corrupt and losing everything? So no, the movie's not more feminist because Olivia Wilde bought Gloria Steinem lunch. It's just more confusing. I'll end with 2 movie recommendations. Go watch Tar and Swallow. Those movies are very creepy and unsettling. Please like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and follow me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram. All my links are in the description box below. Bye!